Welcome everyone to day 2 of our course on organizational leadership and change management. This is Alex Wiseman again, and I want to take a few minutes to introduce you to day 2 and the things that we'll be doing and what I want you to specifically pay attention to so that when we meet together as a class, you'll have all the same ideas in mind that I do. So let's start with that, today's theme. We are going to be talking about educational leadership, broadly speaking. So what is educational leadership? Whether this is the first class that you've taken as part of your degree here, or whether this is your last, link in a long program that has you probably being the master of educational leadership rather than the beginner. This is an important moment to talk about educational leadership and what it actually means. So, couple things that we want to do as part of our process today. We want to talk about the ways that educational leadership embodies change management and the design process. So we're not talking about leadership as a static characteristic. We're talking about leadership and educational leadership in particular as something that is dynamic, that is inherently change driven, and that has an element that can and should be designed as you move through it. So that's going to be important for us as we move forward. We also are going to be learning how to think about or theoretically conceptualize educational leadership, specifically related to Bowman and Deal's 4 frames. That, as you know, is sort of the foundation for everything that we're doing in this class. But we can bring in other theories and other frameworks as well. It doesn't have to be Bowman and Deal. And in fact, they are themselves, as educators and as organizational leadership experts, very aware that there are multiple perspectives, and their mantra throughout all of the chapters that you will read is that there isn't just one way, that there are many different approaches to understanding what's happening and how that applies to the real world, so to speak. So we'll be focusing on that a lot in the readings and in our discussion in class. And then finally, what is particularly special about educational leadership and change management, especially in contrast with organizational leadership? So schools are educational organizations. And so the leadership of schools or of school systems or of school-related or youth-related organizations, whatever they might be, is somehow unique and distinct from other kinds of organizations. You could start with some of the basic ways of thinking about that, like is it a private organization or a public organization? Is it a for-profit organization or a not-for-profit organization? And you could go down the list of, dichotomous contrasts between types of organizations until you find the special niche that your school or your school district or your educational system or whatever your organization is clearly defined. And then we want to talk about how that is unique from other kinds of organizations. The learning for today is broken up into several different modules. There is a lot of reading, 96 pages of reading. I need to update this. There's actually, I think, 12 minutes of watching, and you'll see that updated on your website if you look at it now. And so we're going to really follow those 3 objectives. 1, why are we starting with theories? And then we're going to start with theories. We're going to start with some overview from Bowman and Deal about how they think about frames and reframing, and then what it is to talk about an organization. I'm going to ask you to watch this video. It's a 4-minute long video called The Importance of Theory. It is actually, this man here is an economist, and so you'll hear him reference some economics theories as he talks. Now, obviously, we're not interested in economics per se. That isn't really the focus of this class. But pay more attention to what he's saying about the role of theory and how theory can be developed and how you can develop theory in order to address your specific situations. And what are some better and worse ways to do that? That's going to be important to notice as we listen to this video. For our second module, where we're talking more specifically about what is educational leadership specifically, I'm going to ask you to read a document from Kenneth Leithwood and it's Carolyn. Let's click on it and see, and reel. And it's called What Do We Know About Successful School Leadership? And when you're reading this, well, I don't know what her name is. When we're reading this, I want you to pay attention to a couple things, and I'm going to start you off with a little bit of critique. One is this word successful. I would like for you to scan this document closely and find out what do they mean about success? What does it mean to be successful? How do you define that? Does it mean that scores went up? Does it mean that you don't owe money at the end of the day? Does it mean that nobody quit on the job? Does it mean that everybody wants to be a part of your organization, so it's popular? I mean, there's so many ways to define that. The other thing I want you to note as you're looking through this is that this is a publication that's the product of several large educational associations. One being the American Educational Research Association and Division A. What is this organization? It's a professional organization, which many of you, if you haven't heard of it, you might want to belong to it. Here's her name. Sorry, it is Carolyn Reel. You might want to belong to ARA. I belong to it. The other big organization that you should pay attention to is UCEA, the University Council for Educational Administration. This is one of the key professional organizations, and here you see it over here as well, key professional organizations, for educational administrators, educational leaders. It's really an important and interesting organization. I also am an active participant in UCEA, and I encourage you to do so as well. And then they'll have some definition of what leadership is. I'd like for you to look through this and see how they define it and contrast that with what your own perspectives are and your own understanding of leadership or your own experiences of leadership. And then they go through some research-based conclusions about what successful school leadership is. Again, I have a question about success. I also have a question, I'm sorry, I went too fast, about the word effective, which they keep using. Again, another word that doesn't mean anything unless you define it. So how is success defined? How is effective defined? How do they define leadership, and how does that compare and contrast with your own experiences about leadership? Those are a couple of things to consider as you read through this very short document. And then I want you to watch this do's and don'ts of educational leadership video. This man is a very well-known educational leadership expert. Many of you probably already know him. I won't spoil it if you don't know him. You'll find out who he is in the video. And then our final module will be the challenges of change. And I'm going to ask you to read an excerpt, and remember, please just read these pages 48 through 74 of this linked text from Bornstein and Davis, where they're talking about public sector innovation in particular, but what are some of the challenges when you cause change as part of innovative activity. We're also going to read the introduction from Rick Mintrop's book, that I'm asking you to have a copy of Design-Based School Improvement, the book Design-Based School Improvement, for a class. And then I'd also like for you to watch this video by Lisa Bodell about why organizations resist change. It's going to be really important that you pay attention to this, because she touches on one of the three key changes that can, three key factors that can influence change in any educational organization or in any educational situation, broadly speaking. I'll talk more about them in class, and if you don't hear me talk about them, you remind me that I'm going to talk about infrastructure, capacity building, and sustainability. Because what she's really talking about a lot for this video is the key thing of sustainability. And you'll see what I mean when she talks about it when I talk about it in class. To wrap things up, I'd like for you to take the online quiz for today's modules. It's linked right here. It should be really straightforward. I'd like for you to post your comments online, giving constructive feedback on your small group team member screencast. Remember, that was something that you were supposed to do from yesterday, so make sure that you're posting your comments online in response to your team member screencasts. I would like for you to complete the Frames self-rating scale. This is... just clicked on it, so hopefully it's taking me there. It'll take you to this website. You will then click next, and you'll literally work forward through the Frames self-assessment. At the end of that, it will give you some results for yourself. I'd like for you to print those and bring them to class with you. And then finally, your first real written assignment, I'd like for you to have a written draft of your problem of practice subsection. This doesn't have to be super long. Please use Rick Mintrop's book, chapters 1 and 2, as inspiration. You will see some examples of a problem of practice statement in those. So if you have questions about what those look like, please make sure you're looking at Mintrop chapter 1 and 2. And then I'd like for you to get ready for class. We're going to be looking at a specific case study called The Turnaround at Highland Elementary School. It's 28 pages long. That is in addition to the other reading that you have for the class, so this isn't counted in the 90-some pages for the learning modules. It is a very in-depth case study. It is one of the more in-depth ones, and I wanted you to have a copy of, or actually I wanted us to go through an in-depth case study right at the beginning of our class so that you could really get an idea of what that's like. So I'm just scanning through this so you can see there's a lot of information here that you're going to want to take some time to digest, and you're going to spend some time reviewing so that it's very clear what you're talking about when you get to class. If you have forgotten about how to prepare for these case studies, please go back to the Start Here page and revisit modules 0.1 and 0.3, and I'm just going to click there and remind you that modules 0.1 has to do with what is an educational leadership case study, and you should have already gone through all of this. And then module 0.3 will be me talking about how to analyze your educational case study. So it will give you some pointers for what I want you to do and how I want you to do it related to these case studies. All right? Then finally, at the end of the day, please make comments and share reflections about today's objectives, learning, or application activities in the leave a reply space at the bottom of this page. Here it is. If you have any questions, I ask that you reserve those for class. Bring those to class and ask them live. Your classmates will appreciate being able to be a part of the Q&A time as well. So that is day 2, folks. I'm excited about it. I hope you're excited about it, and I will see you soon.